Is She-Hulk #1 undervalued or overvalued? Well, in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into the numbers and see if we can figure out if now is the time to buy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this video, we got to ask ourselves the question, is now the time to buy Savage She-Hulk #1? Now, this is a question that I've been personally wondering because we know that we're getting She-Hulk soon this year on Disney+, and I know that a hot book in the market has been Savage She-Hulk #1, and so I wanted to kind of do a video where we kind of do a deep dive into some of the comparables and some of the prices of the book and see if we can make a determination if now is a good time to buy this book. But before I get into the video for today, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, doing those things, I would appreciate it. But let us get into this video here today. Now, a lot of people had maybe seen my video where I did something similar to this, where I talked about Werewolf by Night 32, and I asked the question if now is a good time to buy Moon Knight's first appearance, and a lot of you guys said that you really enjoyed that video, so we're going to do something similar here today. Now, a couple of prefaces I have to get out there. Of course, use your own discretion, do your own research. This is not financial advice, and at the end of the day, you should always just be buying what you like anyway, so if you don't like She-Hulk, then definitely this is not the time for you to be buying this book. And then the other little caveat here is that we're going to be talking about fair market value numbers. So in a vacuum, we're going to be using this as comparables. Now, again, if you saw my video where I talked about entry point, it's really about, where you can find this book at what price, and that will be where I make my conclusions at the end of the video. But with that being said, let us get into this topic here today. And of course, we're going to do a similar thing where we're looking at comparables here. Now, I pulled up a bunch of them because there are a lot of interesting books I think we can look at to get a sense of where this She-Hulk book sits within context to the market. So of course, we're talking about Savage She-Hulk #1, a book that came out in 1980. And here are the 8 comparables that I pulled up for this book. The first one is Amazing Spider-Man 194, first appearance of Black Cat. The second one, Uncanny X-Men 129. That's the first appearance of Kitty Pryde, and it is also the first appearance of White Queen. Then at number 3, I have Daredevil #168, first appearance of Elektra. I have Marvel Spotlight #32, first appearance of Spider-Woman. That's the Jessica Drew version of Spider-Woman. I have Miss Marvel 18, first full appearance of Mystique. Avengers Annual #10, first appearance of Rogue. Uncanny X-Men #130, first appearance of Dazzler. And then the last book I have is The Mighty Thor #337, first appearance of Beta Ray Bill. Now, first things first, we got to talk about the top 4 books right there. Historically speaking, before we ever got, the 2021 comic book boom, the 4 books that you see on top typically were more expensive than She-Hulk. The 4 books you see at the bottom, generally speaking, were maybe more expensive, but I would say were sort of around the same general price level. Now, there is a range of years that we're talking about here. I mean, we're mostly focused on Bronze Age books, but the range of these books are 1977 to 1983. She-Hulk sits right in the middle at 1980. Now, out of the gate, I do have to throw this out. When I look at all the characters of first appearances that sit in the slide in front of you, I actually do think that it is possible for She-Hulk to eventually become the most popular character out of all the ones that we see. I mean, I know people really, really love Rogue. I know people really have a fondness towards Black Cat. But when we're talking about, pop culture awareness, what character is going to be in those Avengers films and what character is going to capture, the popularity within the zeitgeist, I really do think that She-Hulk has the potential to be even more popular than all these characters here. So, I do think that it is important to think about that She-Hulk might be the most valuable book of this batch one day if all the numbers work out. But we do have to be a little bit aware of, how people value that ASM 194 book with Black Cat and how people value the X-Men series with Kitty Pryde and White Queen right there. So let's now jump into our first slide here. And I'm going to talk about those first 4 books to start, the ones that historically speaking have been more valuable than the She-Hulk book, before, we got the 2021 boom, even before 2020. And let's pull up some of the fair market values and see if we can make a quick determination of where She-Hulk sits in proportion to all these other ones. And so if we pull up the fair market values right there, we'll see that at the 9.8 grade, this is the CGC 9.8, the fair market value right now for Savage She-Hulk #1 sits around the $1,300 range. If we look at Amazing Spider-Man 194, fair market value is $4,900. Daredevil 168, fair market value is $5,000. That has recently ticked up due to all the speculation with Charlie Cox Daredevil Daredevil. So that book actually has taken a big jump recently. Then we have Uncanny X-Men number 129. That one, fair market value sits around the $4,000 range. And then we have Marvel Spotlight 32, first appearance of Spider-Woman. That one sits at the $3,300 range. So comparing these fair market values of books that generally speaking all came out around the same time, when I look at these price points, to me, it feels like there's a really good opportunity to buy She-Hulk and have it grow to the level of that of, the first appearance of Black Cat or the first appearance of Elektra, because I actually do think that She-Hulk has the potential to be bigger than that of Elektra or Black Cat. But before you guys start going onto eBay and hitting buy it now for every She-Hulk book you can find out there, let us talk about the census count. And this is where it really starts to get interesting. So if we pull up the census numbers, this is where the picture becomes clear as to why the values are what they are. When you look at that She-Hulk book right there, what do you see on the census? 2,309 books at the CGC 9.8 grade. To put that into perspective, if we look at some of the other books, 194, 416, 168, 207, 129, 342, and Marvel Spotlight 32, 210. So as you can see, She-Hulk has 5 times more books than that of Amazing Spider-Man 194. It has almost 10 times as many books as that of Daredevil 168 and Marvel Spotlight 32. So, when we look at those values and we think about it proportionally, actually where the She-Hulk book sits might actually be right where it wants to be. If we think that Amazing Spider-Man 194 has 5 times less books on the census, but is 5 times more valuable, well, proportionally, that works out. So while it does feel like She-Hulk has room to grow in terms of its values, if we're comparing just those apples to apples, when you add in the census factor, it actually does make sense as to why this book isn't hitting those thresholds. Now, let's take a look at the next slide and see the next 4 books that we need to compare this to. And now, these are books that have generally speaking been, slightly above She-Hulk in the past, maybe around the same price range. Let's pull up the fair market value for these books right here. Of course, Miss Marvel 18, first appearance of Mystique, that sits around the $2,200 range. Uncanny X-Men First Dazzler 130, that is $1,800. Avengers Annual number 10, first appearance of Rogue, is $1,650. And then Thor, first appearance of Beta Ray Bill, is $1,050. So now let's pull up the census count and see if we can kind of make a determination where the values sit with this one. And as we pull them up, we see that Ms. Marvel 18 has only 136 books on the census at the 9.0 grade. That is the lowest of all the books we talked about. X-Men 130 has 292. Avengers Annual 10, we're starting to get to that range where it's maybe knocking on the door for She-Hulk, but still only 738. And then Thor 337, that's when we start to see a census number that almost makes sense in comparison to She-Hulk, 1,279. And I think that there's a reason for that. Both the Thor book and the She-Hulk book have those white covers. So there's a lot of ability to press out those defects, unlike, say, a black cover like, Black Cat 194 or Daredevil 168 with Elektra. But with that said, generally speaking, when I take a look at these values and I take a look at these numbers, I really want to focus in on Avengers Annual 10 and Thor 337. When I see that She-Hulk is $300 more than Beta Ray Bill, yet there's twice as many books on the census, it actually doesn't concern me too much, because I actually do think that She-Hulk is twice as popular as Beta Ray Bill. Now, I know all the Beta Ray Bill fans are, already commenting and saying that I'm crazy for thinking that. But, if we just think about the history of the character, She-Hulk has had more solo comic book runs than Beta Ray Bill ever has. He's never had an ongoing. He always has limited series. So to me, it makes sense that her book's value would be more than that of his. So if 1050 is the floor, I feel like that's a safe number for She-Hulk. I don't actually think that the book is going to fall lower than that of Beta Ray Bill. So then I'm going to focus in on the Rogue appearance here, and that's 1650. So, with 738 on the census, there is 3 times as many She-Hulk books. So we kind of have to ask ourselves the question if She-Hulk is going to be 3 times more popular than the character of Rogue. Now, it is certainly possible that that could happen, especially after we get the She-Hulk show on Disney+. Now, I know a lot of us, watched that X-Men animated series, and we all fell in love with the character character of Rogue, but right now, where she stands in pop culture, I'm not so sure that the masses like that character as much as they do She-Hulk. On top of that, the She-Hulk cover, I think objectively is much, much better than that of Avengers Annual number 10. So I think that there's that factor as well. So when I look at a number like 1650 and I look at a number like 1050, to me, this starts to seem like a window that I'm feeling comfortable in, because I think maybe with the popularity of the show, She-Hulk can get up to the level of Rogue. And at the very, very worst, if the show is terrible, I don't think that She-Hulk is going to fall below Beta Ray Bill. But let's move on now to the next slide and take this, napkin math that I did here with a grain of salt. But what I wanted to do was normalize the census count. Like if we were to decide that all of the books that we've been talking about had 1,000 books on the census, and I did like the calculations to proportionally, make the values associate with that of 1,000. So if all of a sudden we injected, 600 more copies of books into Amazing Spider-Man 194, what would that do to the price point of Black Cat? And then if we took away, 1,000 books from She-Hulk, what would that do to her value? So I did the math, and here are the results that we got. So let's start here at the top, and this is actually now in descending order. So She-Hulk, if there was only 1,000 books on the census, the per dollar value that people spend on the book based on the number that is available on the market is actually $29.54 as a fair market value. If Black Cat was corrected up to 1,000 books, her fair market value would go down to $20.41. Then if we go to X-Men 129, Kitty Pryde, $13.33, Beta Ray Bill, $13.12, Avengers Annual 10, $11.78, Daredevil 168, $1,000, Marvel Spotlight 32, $660, X-Men 130, $562, and last but not least, Miss Marvel 18, $282. Now let me clarify, when I'm normalizing the census count here, this isn't me suggesting that like She-Hulk would be so much more valuable if there were less books and therefore the book is undervalued. I'm actually kind of showing the opposite right here. This is the amount of money that people are willing to inject into the current books right now based on where the census counts is. And while I do think that there is an argument to be made that of all the characters on the slide, She-Hulk and Black Cat could be the most popular, I do think it is really interesting to look at this and how they stack rank with each other. And if anything, I definitely think it suggests that, Marvel Spotlight 32 and Miss Marvel 18 feel like a big opportunity and maybe are the two most undervalued books of the ones we're talking about here today. All right, but that was just one interesting way to look at the numbers. And I want to move forward now to something different here. And I wanted to see if I can pull up some books that actually have a comparable census count to that of She-Hulk. And so one of the things I decided to do was pull up, a couple more modern books right here. We have New Mutants 98 and Edge of the Spider-Verse number 2. Now, of course, New Mutants 98, first appearance of Deadpool, Edge of the Spider-Verse number 2, first appearance of Spider-Gwen. These are two very, very, very popular characters and have census counts that are more comparable to that of She-Hulk. So I thought that, maybe comparing a Copper Age book and a Modern Age book could give us another understanding of the values of She-Hulk. Now, if we pull up the census counts here, we can see that New Mutants 98 has 3,684 as 9.8 grades. This is a CGC 9.8s that we're talking about here. And then Edge of the Spider-Verse has 2,795. We're just talking about the first print. So let's move on to the comparables with this. Now, let me get one thing clear. It is my opinion that Deadpool and Spider-Gwen are more popular than She-Hulk. So in my opinion, the fair market value for their 9.8 grades should be higher than that of the She-Hulk book. Now, I do think that it is possible that, if She-Hulk has a very successful show and then she's in Avengers movies and she does this over the course of the next phase of the MCU, in a few years' time, I do think that it's possible that She-Hulk can get to the level of, say, a Deadpool or maybe get to the level of a Spider-Gwen. But I would be very weary of her getting there too fast. So if we pull up these fair market values, where do they sit in proportion to She-Hulk? Well, we see that Deadpool's first appearance, New Mutants 98, is $1,988, and Edge of Spider-Verse, Spider-Gwen is $1,850. This currently feels actually decently proportional to me, where I think maybe into the future, She-Hulk's popularity can go up to that of Deadpool or Spider-Gwen, so she can look ahead to that $2,000 range as a potential in the future. But right now, to me, I think that if we get She-Hulk, maybe this book can push that $1,700. But if it gets to around where New Mutants 98 is, that's going to be a red flag to me. So again, let's kind of go into our buying windows here. Remember, we talked about entry points here So I'm going to make a conclusion about this book based on the entry point. And of course, we're talking about CGC 9.8s. So if you are someone who wants to get this book and you are paying between $1,700 to $2,000, one of the record high sales, even in this year of 2022, was at that 2K threshold. In my opinion, it is very, very risky to be buying at this level because you are banking on the fact that once we get She-Hulk, she is going to be instantly as popular as Daredevil and Spider-Gwen and command the same value that those books command for those respective characters. And while I do think that it's possible that in time, maybe a few years down the road, she can raise her star power to that level, I think that it's personally very, very risky. Now at the $1,300 to $1,700 level, I think that I would call this generally risky. Like I think her book's value can go up to that of Avengers Annual number 10. You know, we're starting to think first appearance of Rogue levels here. So I do think that, you know, her book can be elevated after the show. But remember, there are so many on the census count that it is possible that there's going to be a massive influx of supply. And if she doesn't knock it absolutely out of the park in her TV show, there's going to be a lot of sellers on the market and not a lot of buyers. So then we get down to that fair market value of $1,300 and sometimes around $1,000, which is, you know, sometimes people have bought this book even in this calendar year around the $1,000 range. And this is where I think it is a good opportunity. If you can find this book around the $1,000 to $1,300 range and you are a fan of the She-Hulk character, I actually think that this is a decent window to buy in. I think you would be safely mitigating your risk around that level. And I think you could buy with confidence that the book might have some correction, but will probably not fall below that $1,000 threshold. Because if we think about some of the other characters that are out there and compared to She-Hulk, I think that her star power will rise. And I think that there is evidence to suggest that that floor is a strong support level to a lot of other comparable characters. Anyways, that is all for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Again, you know, please do your own research. Don't go out there getting FOMO on things. Make sure that when you buy this book, if you are someone who is buying this book, you actually want to own this thing. Anyways, that is all for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys kind of like this series where I do the comparables and go deep dives into the numbers for certain books? Let me know if there's other characters or other books that you're interested in that you would love for me to do a video about. Put it in the comments and let me know. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next video.